My name is Quentin, 27 years old, and I always thought I had a close family. We took vacations together, celebrated holidays, and smiled in photos. But beneath the surface, I felt like an outsider looking in. When my car crashed on that rainy Tuesday evening, paramedics called everyone in my emergency contacts. No one showed up. Then I saw my brother's social media post road trip with the real family. If you're watching this, let me know where you're from in the comments. Have you ever felt betrayed by the people who should care most? Hit subscribe and join me as I share how I finally stood up for myself after years of being the forgotten son. I never thought my story would resonate with so many people, but family dynamics can be complicated. Let me take you back to what my life was like before everything changed. I work as a graphic designer at Horizon Creative, a mid-sized agency in Portland. I love what I do, even with the tight deadlines and demanding clients. There's something satisfying about transforming a vague concept into a visual that captures exactly what someone wants to communicate. My workspace is cluttered with sketches, reference books, and empty coffee cups. My colleagues joke that my desk looks like organized chaos, but I always know where everything is. My family consists of my parents Howard and Regina, my older brother Blake, who's 29, and my younger sister Tiffany, who's 24. On paper, we're the picture-perfect American family. Dad owns a successful insurance agency. Mom works in real estate. Blake followed Dad's footsteps into the financial world, and Tiffany works at Mom's real estate office. Then there's me, the middle child who chose a creative path instead of business. Growing up, I tried so hard to fit in with my family. When Blake won trophies for football, I joined the team too, despite hating every minute of practice. When Tiffany showed talent for piano, I took lessons as well, spending hours practicing pieces I never quite mastered. I wasn't bad at these things, just not exceptional, like my siblings seemed to be at everything they touched. Blake has always been the golden child. He graduated from an Ivy League university, landed a job at a prestigious investment firm, and recently got promoted to senior financial advisor. He drives a BMW, lives in a luxury apartment downtown, and never misses an opportunity to mention his latest achievement or acquisition. At family dinners, he dominates conversation with stories about his important clients or the exclusive restaurant he tried. "You should see the view from my office," Mom Blake would say. 42nd floor overlooking the entire city. "My assistant brings me lunch from that place you love so much." My parents would beam with pride, asking follow-up questions that kept him talking for another 30 minutes, while my stories about design projects remained untold. Tiffany, the baby of the family, gets a different kind of attention. Mom picks her up for lunch 3 times a week, helps her shop for clothes, and calls her daily. When Tiffany wanted to join Mom's real estate team without any experience, Mom created a special position for her. When Tiffany totaled her car last year, Dad bought her a new one within days. When she broke up with her boyfriend, the whole family canceled plans to comfort her. I've tried countless times to be included. I'd suggest family movie nights that would get rescheduled until everyone forgot. I'd make plans with Dad to go fishing only for him to call last minute because something came up with Blake. I'd offer to help Mom with dinner, but she'd prefer Tiffany's company in the kitchen. 3 months ago, I spent 3 months' salary planning Dad's 60th birthday party. I rented his favorite restaurant, invited all his friends, and commissioned a custom portrait of our family. The party was a success, but during speeches, Mom only mentioned the beautiful celebration Blake arranged, even though my brother merely helped with invitations. When I gently reminded her later that I had organized everything, she said, "Oh, you helped too. That was sweet of you." The portrait I spent weeks collaborating on with the artist hung in their hallway for 2 weeks before being replaced by Blake's gift, a signed jersey from Dad's favorite athlete. My ex-girlfriend Amanda noticed it first. We dated for 2 years before breaking up 8 months ago. During a Thanksgiving dinner, she observed how my parents interrupted me repeatedly, but hung on every word Blake said. "Your family treats you like you're invisible," she told me afterward. "Don't you see it?" I defended them initially. "They're just busy. They have a lot going on." But Amanda's words stuck with me, and once I started noticing the pattern, I couldn't unsee it. We broke up for several reasons, but one factor was how uncomfortable family gatherings made her feel, watching me try so hard for scraps of attention. Despite everything, I kept trying. I'd text my mom articles I thought she'd enjoy. I helped Dad set up his new computer. I sent Tiffany design tips for her real estate listings. I congratulated Blake on his successes. I showed up to every family event with a smile, hoping that eventually they'd see me too. The morning of the accident, I was feeling cautiously optimistic. Blake had texted the family group chat about a cabin getaway weekend he was planning for everyone in the mountains. A whole weekend with my family in a beautiful setting sounded perfect. Maybe away from distractions we could actually connect. Count me in, I replied immediately. Let me know what I can bring or help with. No one responded to my message, but I figured they were busy. I'd follow up later about details. Little did I know how that enthusiastic text would come back to haunt me. The day of the accident started like any other Tuesday. I woke up at 6:30, went for a quick run, showered, and made breakfast. The weather forecast predicted rain, so I grabbed my umbrella before heading out. Traffic was typical for a weekday morning. Slow, but moving. I arrived at the office just before 9, coffee in hand, ready to tackle the Westbrook account that had been giving our team headaches for weeks. Morning, Quentin. Jeff called from his desk across from mine. Jeff was my closest friend at work. Possibly my closest friend, period, since Amanda and I split. Ready for the client. Call at 11. As ready as I'll ever be, I replied, booting up my computer. I was up until midnight tweaking those mock-ups. The Westbrook project was a major rebrand for a regional bank, and the client had rejected our first 3 proposals. My creative director had put me in charge of the 4th attempt, a responsibility that both excited and terrified me. If this design landed, it could mean a promotion. If not, well, I didn't want to think about that. Between meetings and revisions, I barely had time to check my phone. During my lunch break, I finally scrolled through social media and saw something strange. Blake had posted a photo of our parents and Tiffany shopping at an outdoor equipment store. The caption read, "Gearing up for our mountain escape number. Family time number. Weekend vibes." I frowned, checking the timestamp. The photo had been posted an hour ago. Why were they shopping for the trip without me? I sent a quick text to the family group. "Looks like you guys are getting supplies. Need me to pick up anything specific?" No response came. I tried not to overthink it as I returned to work. The client call went surprisingly well, with positive feedback on my designs and only minor adjustments requested. By 5:30, I had completed the revisions and was packing up to head home, feeling accomplished but exhausted. "Nice work today," Jeff said, giving me a thumbs up. "That client actually smiled for once. I think you nailed it." "Thanks, man." "I hope so. Are we still on for that basketball game Thursday?" "Absolutely. Sarah's coming too. You should bring someone." I forced a smile. Jeff was always trying to set me up since my breakup with Amanda. "I'll see if I'm free first," I said, which was our ongoing joke about my perpetually empty social calendar. The rain had picked up significantly by the time I left the office. Traffic was moving at a crawl and visibility was poor. I turned on the radio to distract myself from the frustration of the commute, but my mind kept drifting back to Blake's photo. Had they deliberately excluded me from the shopping trip? Were they planning the weekend without me? At a red light, I checked my phone again and felt my stomach drop. Blake had posted another update. A car selfie with everyone squeezed into the frame luggage visible in the background. "Road trip begins. Heading to the mountains with the crew. Number cabin weekend starts now." They were already leaving for the trip. Today. Not the weekend as originally mentioned, but now. And no one had told me. The light turned green, but I was still staring at my phone, trying to process this information. A horn honked behind me, startling me back to attention. I accelerated through the intersection, my mind racing with confusion and hurt. I didn't see the pickup truck until it was too late. The driver had run the red light from the cross street, likely also struggling with visibility in the downpour. I swerved instinctively, but the truck clipped my passenger side, sending my car spinning across the slick pavement. Everything moved in slow motion. The screech of tires, the crunch of metal, the explosion of my airbag deploying in a cloud of dust and chemicals. When the motion stopped, I was facing the wrong direction, my car halfway on the sidewalk. The acrid smell of burnt rubber filled my nostrils. Pain radiated from my left shoulder and chest where the seatbelt had restrained me. Something warm trickled down my forehead into my eye. Blood. People were running toward my car, shouting things I couldn't quite process. Someone was asking if I was okay, telling me not to move. Through the cracked window, I could see the driver of the pickup getting out, looking dazed, but apparently uninjured. I tried to reach for my phone, but a sharp pain shot through my collarbone, definitely broken. The world started to blur around the edges, shock setting in as sirens wailed in the distance. The paramedics arrived quickly, professionally assessing my injuries as they extracted me from the vehicle. Probable fractured clavicle, minor head laceration, possible concussion, one called out as they transferred me to a stretcher. I tried to focus on their faces, but my vision kept swimming. "Sir, can you tell us your name?" a female paramedic asked, shining a light in my eyes. "Quentin," I managed to say. "Quentin Reynolds." "Quentin, we're taking you to Portland General. Is there someone we should call?" I gave them my phone passcode, told them to call my family. They were all saved under favorites. As the ambulance doors closed and we pulled away from the scene of the accident, I had one clear thought. At least now my family would know why I wasn't responding to any messages about the trip. Little did I know they hadn't sent any. I regained full awareness in the emergency room, the harsh fluorescent lights making my head pound even more. A curtain separated me from the bustle of the hospital, creating an illusion of privacy. My left shoulder was immobilized, and someone had cleaned the blood from my face. The clock on the wall read 7:45 p.m. "You're awake," a nurse said, noticing my open eyes as she checked my vitals. Her name tag read Marie. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck," I replied, wincing at how literally true that was. Marie smiled sympathetically. "Dr. Gregory will be in soon to discuss your injuries. We've contacted your emergency contacts. Your family should be here soon." I nodded, feeling a wave of relief. Despite everything in a crisis, family shows up. That's what I'd always believed. Dr. Gregory arrived 15 minutes later, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and glasses perched on his nose. He explained my injuries methodically. A fractured clavicle, mild concussion, various contusions, and a laceration on my forehead that required 6 stitches. "You were lucky," he concluded. "The airbag and seatbelt did their jobs. We'll need to keep you overnight for observation because of the concussion. But barring any complications, you should be able to go home tomorrow. Is there someone who can stay with you for a day or 2 after discharge?" "My family is on the way," I said, though I realized it had been over an hour since I'd arrived. Dr. Gregory nodded. "Excellent. I'll check on you again before the end of my shift. The nurse will get you settled in a room upstairs soon." After he left, I reached for my phone on the side table, grimacing at the pain the movement caused. The screen was cracked but functional. No missed calls or texts from my family. Strange. I called my mom first. The phone rang until voicemail picked up. "Hi, Mom, it's Quentin. I'm at Portland General Hospital. Had a car accident. Nothing too serious, but they're keeping me overnight. Can you let everyone know? Thanks." Next, I tried my dad. Same result. Then Blake. Then Tiffany. All straight to voicemail. I left similar messages for each. By 9:30, I had been moved to a room on the 4th floor. Still no word from my family. The nurse had given me pain medication that made me drowsy, but anxiety kept me from fully relaxing. Where were they? Had something happened? I tried calling again. Nothing. At 10:15, I opened Instagram, thinking maybe there was some explanation there. Blake's latest story updated my worst fears. A video pan of a rustic cabin interior flames, crackling in a stone fireplace. My parents arranging food on a large wooden table. Tiffany laughing as she unpacked a board game. Blake's voice narrating. Made it to the cabin. Let the long weekend begin. Road trip with the real family. Number best family. Number mountain retreat. The real family. The words hit me like a physical blow. They hadn't forgotten to tell me about the change of plans. They hadn't missed my calls because they were driving in a remote area. They had deliberately left without me. And now they were ignoring calls from the hospital. I scrolled through the comments. Friends congratulating them on the beautiful cabin. My mom responding with heart emojis. They were all online, all seeing notifications. They were choosing not to respond. The pain medication couldn't touch this new kind of hurt. I lay in the hospital bed listening to the beeping of monitors and the occasional footsteps in the hallway, feeling more alone than I ever had before. At 11:30, Nurse Marie came to check my vitals again. "No family yet?" she asked, trying to sound casual, but unable to hide the concern in her voice. "They're out of town," I lied, the words bitter on my tongue. "But I've called a friend." As soon as she left, I texted Jeff. I hated bothering him so late, but I had no one else. At Portland General. "Car accident. Nothing serious, but need a ride home tomorrow. Sorry to ask." His response came within minutes. "On my way now." "Which room?" I texted him the details, a lump forming in my throat at this simple act of kindness from someone who wasn't even family. Jeff arrived 20 minutes later, slightly out of breath, like he'd run from the parking lot. His eyes widened at the sight of me, bandaged and hooked up to monitors. "Jesus, Quentin, you said nothing serious." "Compared to dead, it's not." I attempted a smile. "Broken collarbone concussion, some stitches. They're keeping me overnight for observation." Jeff pulled a chair close to the bed. "What happened? Where's your family?" I hesitated, the humiliation of the truth making me pause. Then I showed him Blake's Instagram story. "They left for a cabin trip today. Without telling me. The paramedics called them, but..." I couldn't finish the sentence. Jeff's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to anger. "Are you serious? They're posting on social media while you're in the hospital." "That's..." He struggled to find words appropriate for a hospital setting. "Yeah," I said quietly. "That's my family." Jeff stayed until visiting hours ended, promising to return in the morning to drive me home. Before leaving, he squeezed my good shoulder gently. "For what it's worth, Quentin, you deserve better than this." As I drifted off to sleep, those words echoed in my mind. Did I deserve better? Or was there something fundamentally unlovable about me that even my own family couldn't see past? In my dreams, I kept driving through the rain, unable to find the brake pedal, watching helplessly as my family waved from the roadside, but made no move to help as my car careened toward disaster. The next morning, true to his word, Jeff arrived to take me home. The hospital discharge process took longer than expected, with prescriptions to fill and follow-up appointments to schedule. By the time we left, it was past noon. "You can't stay alone with a concussion," Jeff said as we got into his car. "Sarah and I talked about it. You're staying with us until you're cleared." I started to protest, but he cut me off. "Non-negotiable, man. Doctor's orders. Someone needs to monitor you. And I'm not letting you call a rideshare every time you need something." Jeff and Sarah lived in a cozy 2-bedroom apartment about 15 minutes from my place. Sarah was waiting when we arrived, having prepared their guest room and made a pot of homemade soup. Her kindness nearly broke me. "I called your boss," Jeff said as he helped me settle in. "Explained everything. He says take all the time you need and can work remotely when you feel up to it." Over the next 4 days, I existed in a strange limbo. Physically, I was healing according to schedule. The concussion symptoms were subsiding, though the pain from my collarbone remained sharp with movement. Emotionally, I was adrift. Still no word from my family. Not a text, not a call. I checked my phone obsessively at first, then less frequently as acceptance set in. They were continuing their vacation as if nothing had happened, as if I didn't exist. Blake's social media provided an unwanted window into their world. Photos of hiking trails, my dad grilling steaks on an outdoor patio, my mom and Tiffany making s'mores by a campfire. Everyone smiling, having the time of their lives. "I can't believe they haven't even texted to check on you," Sarah said on the third night, as we sat in their living room watching a movie I couldn't focus on. "Have they always been like this?" The question made me reflect on patterns I'd normalized for years. Not this extreme, I admitted. "But yeah, I've always been the afterthought." I told them about Dad's birthday party, about the countless family events where I felt invisible, about how my accomplishments were acknowledged with obligatory congratulations while Blake's were celebrated for weeks. Last Christmas, I recalled, I spent weeks finding the perfect gift for each of them. I got Mom this vintage brooch she'd admired in an antique shop months earlier. She opened it, said, "Oh, that's nice," and set it aside. 5 minutes later, Blake gave her a generic spa gift card, and she cried with joy. The brooch is probably still in its box somewhere. Jeff and Sarah exchanged glances, the kind of look that communicates volumes between people who truly know each other. "Have you ever thought about," Sarah began, carefully creating some distance from them, setting boundaries. The concept seemed foreign. "They're my family," I said, weakly, though the words felt hollow. "Family should be the people who show up when you're in the hospital," Jeff said. "Sarah's right. You might need to reevaluate what that relationship looks like for your own well-being." That night I lay awake in their guest room, staring at the ceiling. Was Jeff right? The thought of cutting ties with my family filled me with equal parts terror and relief. Who would I be without the constant struggle for their approval? What would fill the space left by that familiar pain? On the 4th day after the accident, I felt well enough to do some work remotely. Sarah had gone to her job as a veterinary technician, and Jeff had meetings at the office but promised to check in during lunch. I set up my laptop at their dining table, trying to focus on a minor project. My boss had sent something simple to ease me back in. My phone lit up with a notification, then another, and another. 41 missed calls, all within the last hour. Mom, Dad, Blake, Tiffany. Text messages flooding in. Then a Venmo request from Blake, $3 100.00. The note read, "Your share of cabin weekend. Everyone's chipping in." I stared at the screen in disbelief. After 4 days of silence while I recovered from a car accident, their first communication was a demand for money for a trip I wasn't even invited on. A text from my mother appeared. "Call back. It's urgent. We can't fix this without you." Fix what, I wondered. And then the messages clarified everything. "Blake dude, call ASAP. Situation at cabin. Tiffany OMGQ, we're in trouble. Blake messed up big time. Dad, son, we need to discuss the cabin damage. Your financial contribution is expected. Family responsibility." I pieced together the story through their frantic texts. Blake had invited friends over to the cabin without the owner's permission. They'd had a party that got out of control. Something about a broken window, damaged furniture, and a small fire that scorched the deck. The owner was demanding payment for repairs immediately or threatening legal action. The total came to $15,500. Split 5 ways, that was $3,100 each. I felt a surge of anger so powerful it made my broken collarbone seem insignificant. After ignoring me, excluding me, and abandoning me at my most vulnerable, they had the audacity to demand I pay for damages from their vacation. My phone rang again. "Mom." I let it go to voicemail. Another text, "Quentin, please. We're all contributing. It's a family matter." A family matter. The irony was almost laughable. I hadn't been family enough to include in the trip or check on in the hospital, but I was family enough to pay for their mistakes. When Jeff came home for lunch and found me staring at my phone, I wordlessly showed him the messages. "You have got to be kidding me," he said, reading through them. "They can't be serious." "Oh, they're serious," I replied, a strange calm settling over me. "And they expect me to pay up without question, like I always do. You're not considering it, are you?" I looked at my friend, saw the genuine concern in his eyes, so different from the obligation I usually saw in my family's. Teen. Something shifted inside me, a realization crystallizing that had been forming for years. "No," I said firmly. "I'm not." My phone rang again. Mom, for the 12th time. This time I answered and put it on speaker. "Quentin, finally. We've been trying to reach you for hours." Her voice was shrill with stress. "I've been recovering from a car accident," I said evenly. "The one I was in 4 days ago. The one the hospital called you about while you were driving to the cabin." There was a pause. What car accident? We never got any call." "Check your call logs, Mom." "Portland General Hospital, Tuesday evening around 6:30. I heard muffled conversation on the other end, then my father's voice. "Son, whatever miscommunication happened, we can discuss that later. Right now, we have a situation that needs immediate attention. Blake sent you the Venmo request." "He did." "Good. If you can process that payment right away, we can settle with the cabin owner before this escalates. We're all doing our part here. The casual dismissal of my accident, the immediate pivot back to their crisis, confirmed everything I'd been feeling. Put me on video, I said. I want to see everyone. There was shuffling then, my phone screen filled with their faces. Mom looking stressed, Dad stern, Blake anxious, Tiffany in the background biting her nails. Before we discuss any payment, I said I'd like to know why none of you came to the hospital or even called to check if I was okay after my accident. Blake rolled his eyes. Oh, come on, we're dealing with something serious here. So am I. I replied, my voice steady, despite the anger building inside. I was hit by a truck. My car is totaled. I have a broken collarbone and a concussion. I spent the night in the hospital alone because none of you answered the calls from emergency services. Mom's expression shifted to confusion. We never got any calls from a hospital. We would have come if we had. Check your call logs, I repeated. All of you, right now. The camera shook as they presumably looked at their phones. I watched their faces, waiting for the moment of recognition. There is a call, Dad admitted reluctantly. But it was while we were driving up winding roads. No reception. By the time we got to the cabin, there were other things happening. Other things like posting on Instagram about your real family road trip. I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. Blake had the decency to look uncomfortable. That was just a caption, man. Don't be so sensitive. I saw the hospital called, he admitted after a moment of silence. But I figured it was just you making up an excuse to get out of the weekend after we didn't respond to your texts fast enough. The casual cruelty of his assumption left me speechless. Quentin, my mother, interjected, whatever misunderstanding happened, we're sorry you were hurt. But right now we need to focus on this cabin situation. It's a family emergency. A family emergency, I repeated. Interesting how that works. When I'm lying in a hospital bed, I'm not family enough for a text message. When you need money to fix a mess Blake made, suddenly I'm family again. That's not fair, Dad said sternly. We all have responsibilities to each other. Do we? I asked quietly. Because from where I'm sitting, that responsibility only seems to flow in one direction. The call devolved into chaos after that. Blake shouting about how I was making everything about myself as usual. Mom crying, saying I was being cruel. Dad demanding I man up and help the family. Tiffany mostly silent, looking uncomfortable. I listened to it all with a strange detachment, as if observing a scene in a movie rather than my own life. When there was finally a lull in their protestations, I spoke. I won't be sending any money, I said clearly. Not for a trip I wasn't included in, for damage I had no part in causing. For the first time, this isn't my problem to fix. I ended the call before they could respond, then turned off my phone entirely. The silence that followed felt like the first clean breath after escaping a smoke-filled room. Jeff, who had witnessed the entire exchange, sat down beside me. You okay? No, I answered honestly. But I think maybe I will be. When I turned my phone back on that evening, the barrage continued. Texts, voicemails, emails, all with escalating urgency and guilt. The cabin owner had given them 48 hours to pay for damages before pursuing legal action. They needed my share to make it work. Your brother made a mistake, Mom wrote. We all make mistakes. Family forgives and helps each other through difficult times. Remember when we paid your security deposit for your first apartment, Dad texted. This is no different. Blake alternated between apologies and accusations. I'm sorry about the hospital thing, but you're being selfish now when we really need you. Tiffany sent a photo of the damaged cabin, as if visual evidence would convince me. The deck was indeed scorched, a window broken, furniture overturned. Please help her message read. Blake invited these guys he works with and they got crazy. I tried to stop it, but no one listened to me. That last message nearly broke my resolve. Tiffany had always been the least culpable in the family dynamics. More a product of our parents' favoritism than an architect of it. But then I remembered how she too had ignored the hospital calls, how she appeared in all the smiling cabin photos without a thought for where I might be. The next morning I received an email from Blake with a formal breakdown of expenses and payment options. It was surreal, the detailed spreadsheet listing damages, as if this were a normal business transaction between colleagues, not a demand following days of callous disregard. Against Jeff and Sarah's advice, I agreed to a video call with the entire family that evening. I needed to say certain things directly, not through text or email where they could be ignored or misconstrued. "You don't owe them an explanation," Sarah argued, as she helped me adjust the sling supporting my injured arm. "They know what they did." "I'm not doing it for them," I replied. "I'm doing it for me." At 7 sharp, I connected to the call from Jeff and Sarah's dining room. They had offered to leave to give me privacy, but I asked them to stay nearby. Their presence gave me strength. My family appeared on screen, all gathered in what looked like the cabin's main room. The mood was tense, their faces set in various expressions of stress and expectation. "Quentin," my father began immediately, "I hope you've reconsidered your position. We need to resolve this matter quickly." "I've thought about it carefully," I said, "and my answer is still no." The protests began instantly, everyone talking over each other. I let them go for a minute, then raised my hand. "I'd like to speak without interruption," I said firmly. "After all, I'm the only one who wasn't invited to this family trip, the only one who spent a night in the hospital alone, and the only one who hasn't been involved in creating this problem. I think I've earned a few minutes to speak." Surprisingly, they fell silent. "For as long as I can remember," I've been trying to earn my place in this family. I've shown up to every event, celebrated every achievement, offered help whenever asked. I planned Dad's 60th birthday party that everyone credited to Blake. I drive 2 hours every Sunday for family dinner, even when I have deadlines the next day. I listen to all your problems and offer support. And still somehow I'm always the afterthought. My mother started to object, but I continued. "You planned this trip without telling me the actual date. You left without a word. When the hospital called, you all saw it and chose to ignore it. And now your first communication in 4 days is not to ask how I'm doing, but to demand money." "We didn't know about the accident," Mom insisted. "We explained that. Blake just admitted yesterday that he saw the hospital call and assumed I was making excuses," I countered. "And even if by some incredible coincidence all of you missed those calls, not one of you thought to check why I wasn't responding to messages for 4 days. Not one of you was concerned. No one had an answer for that. Here's what I think happened," I continued, finding strength in finally speaking these truths. "You never intended to include me in this trip. The group message was sent to avoid directly excluding me, but the plan was always for just the 4 of you. When the hospital called, it was inconvenient timing that would have disrupted your perfect weekend, so you ignored it." Blake's expression confirmed my suspicions. He'd never been good at hiding guilt. "Quentin, you're making assumptions," Dad said. "We had poor reception in the mountains. By the time we could check messages, we were dealing with this situation. So, posting Instagram stories was possible with poor reception. Responding to comments, that worked fine." Another uncomfortable silence. "Look," Blake finally said, "maybe we screwed up with the hospital thing. I'm sorry about that, but this cabin situation is real, and we need to solve it together. $3,100 is a lot, but split between all of us, it's manageable." "All of us," I repeated. "You mean all of you plus me? Because I'm family when you need money, but not when you're planning trips or when I'm injured." "Stop being so dramatic," Blake snapped. "It's not always about you." "That's exactly my point," I said quietly. "It's never about me. Not once has it been about me." The call deteriorated from there. My mother cried about how I was being cruel and unforgiving. My father lectured about family duty and responsibility. Blake oscillated between apologies and accusations. Tiffany mostly stayed quiet occasionally, making half-hearted attempts to mediate. Through it all, I maintained my position. I would not be paying for damages from a trip I wasn't part of. I would not continue to accept being treated as an afterthought. Something had fundamentally changed inside me, a shift that couldn't be reversed. As the call ended with nothing resolved, I felt exhausted but oddly peaceful. For perhaps the first time in my life, I had stood my ground with my family, had refused to accept the role they'd assigned me. Jeff and Sarah, who had heard everything from the kitchen, came in as I disconnected the call. "That was incredible," Sarah said, squeezing my good shoulder gently. "I don't think I've ever heard you stand up for yourself like that." "How do you feel?" Jeff asked. I considered the question carefully. Like I've been carrying a weight for years and just put it down. It hurts, but also, there's relief. That night I slept better than I had in months, perhaps years. The next morning, the messages continued, but their tone had shifted. Less demanding, more pleading. The deadline from the cabin owner was approaching, and they were scrambling. A new text from Tiffany caught my attention. "I understand why you're angry. I would be too. I'm sorry we've been terrible. Can we talk just us?" It was the first genuine acknowledgement from any of them. I agreed to call her later. For now, though, I had a decision to make about what kind of relationship, if any, I wanted with my family moving forward. The path ahead wasn't clear, but for once I was determined to walk it on my own terms. The day after the explosive video call, I moved back to my apartment. Jeff and Sarah helped me settle in, stocking my refrigerator and making sure I had everything I needed within easy reach, given my limited mobility. The doctor had cleared me to be alone as my concussion symptoms had subsided, though my collarbone would take weeks to heal completely. "Call us for anything," Sarah insisted as they prepared to leave, day or night. "And we expect you for dinner twice a week minimum," Jeff added. Non-negotiable. Their kindness continued to astonish me. In just a few days, they had shown more genuine care than my family had in years. It made the contrast all the more stark. Alone in my apartment, I took stock of my situation. My car was totaled, though insurance would eventually cover most of it. I could work remotely for now, but would need rides once I returned to the office. My body was healing, but the emotional wounds felt freshly opened. The texts from my family had slowed but not stopped. The latest update was that they had pooled their resources and paid the cabin owner, though it had strained them financially, as Dad put it in his most recent guilt trip message. The immediate crisis had passed, but the underlying issues remained unresolved. I had promised to call Tiffany, and unlike my family, I kept my promises. When I called that evening, she answered immediately. "Quentin," she sounded genuinely relieved. "How are you feeling?" "How bad is your shoulder?" "Broken collarbone, lots of bruising, some stitches in my forehead," I replied. "Could have been worse." "I'm really sorry," she said quietly. "About all of it. The hospital, the trip, everything. Why didn't you call me back when you saw the hospital had called?" I asked the question that had been burning inside me for days. Tiffany was silent for a moment. "Blake said he talked to you. That you were fine, but couldn't make the trip because of work." I believed him. This was new information. Blake told everyone he'd spoken to me. "Yes. When we saw the hospital call, Mom got worried. Blake said he'd call you back. Later he told us everything was fine, just a minor fender bender. No injuries. But you had to stay behind to finish some big project. We all just accepted it." The deliberate deception made the betrayal even worse. Blake had actively lied to prevent the family from checking on me, presumably to avoid disrupting their perfect getaway. "I should have checked myself," Tiffany admitted. "I knew something felt off. You always text me directly about stuff. I just got caught up in the trip and I don't know. I'm sorry." Her apology seemed genuine, but it didn't erase what had happened. We talked for a while longer. Tiffany filling in more details about the cabin disaster, mostly centering around Blake's friends getting drunk and careless with the fireplace, leading to the scorched deck and other damages. After we hung up, I sat in the gathering darkness of my living room, turning over this new information. Blake's deliberate lie changed things. This wasn't just thoughtlessness or poor reception as they'd claimed. It was an intentional choice to exclude me, then cover it up. The next morning I called a therapist. The hospital had recommended counseling for potential trauma from the accident, but I realized I needed help processing much more than that. I found Patricia Miller, a counselor specializing in family dynamics, who could see me that week. In our first session, Patricia listened as I poured out the whole story, from the lifetime of feeling secondary to the recent events. When I finished, she asked a question that caught me off guard. What would a healthy relationship with your family look like to you? I'd been so focused on what was wrong that I hadn't considered what right might look like. I don't know, I admitted. I've never had one. That's where we'll start then, she said. Defining what healthy boundaries and expectations would mean for you. Over the next 2 weeks, I worked with Patricia while continuing my physical recovery. I began to understand patterns that had been invisible to me before. How I'd been cast in the role of family caretaker without reciprocal care. How my own behavior enabled their treatment of me. At home, I started a project that Patricia had suggested. I began collecting evidence of the pattern screenshots of ignored messages, one-sided conversations, instances where my needs were dismissed while others were prioritized. I reviewed photographs from family events, noticing for the first time how often I was literally on the periphery, making room for others at the center. I found emails where I'd rearranged my schedule for family obligations, only to have them canceled when something more important came up. Text threads where my accomplishments received brief acknowledgement, while others were celebrated extensively. It was painful to see it all laid out so clearly, but also validating. This wasn't in my head. It was real, and it was documented. While I worked through this process, the pressure from my family continued. My father called about resolving the financial situation, since they had covered my share of the cabin damages. My mother alternated between guilt trips about how my stubbornness was causing her anxiety and pleas for family unity. Blake made a half-hearted apology that quickly devolved into justifications for his actions. Only Tiffany maintained a different approach, checking on me regularly and respecting when I needed space. Our conversations became more honest than they'd ever been. She confessed feeling trapped in her role as the favored daughter pressured to work with our mother, despite wanting to explore other careers, afraid to rock the boat. I never realized how much they put on you until now, she told me during one call. How they expect you to drop everything when they need something but never do the same for you. 3 weeks after the accident, I made a decision. With Patricia's guidance, I wrote a letter to my family, not in anger, but in clarity. I detailed the patterns I'd observed, how they had affected me, and what I needed moving forward if we were to have any relationship. I didn't send it immediately. I let it sit for a few days, revisiting and revising, until it expressed exactly what I wanted to say. This wasn't about punishment or revenge. It was about truth and boundaries. When I finally felt ready, I called my parents and asked for a family meeting at my apartment that weekend. To my surprise, they agreed readily, perhaps sensing this was their opportunity to bring me back into the fold on their terms. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Jeff asked when I told him about the planned meeting. He and Sarah had continued to check on me daily, including me in their lives in ways my actual family never had. "I don't think I'll ever feel completely ready," I admitted. "But I need to do this. For me." The day before the meeting, I cleaned my apartment as best I could with one functioning arm. I arranged chairs in the living room, set out water and coffee. I printed copies of my letter for everyone. I rehearsed what I wanted to say, focusing on facts rather than accusations. That night, I barely slept, anxiety about the confrontation keeping me awake. But beneath the anxiety was something else, determination. Whatever happened tomorrow, I would no longer accept being the forgotten son, the convenient family member who was included only when needed. One way or another, things would change. Saturday arrived with unexpected sunshine after a week of rain. I took it as a good omen, as I made final preparations for the family meeting. Jeff had offered to be present for moral support, but I decided this was something I needed to do alone. At precisely 2 p.m., the doorbell rang. I took a deep breath, steadying myself, and opened the door. They filed in awkwardly, my parents first, followed by Blake and Tiffany. Mom immediately noticed my sling and the fading bruise on my forehead, her expression shifting to concern. "Oh, Quentin," she said, reaching toward me as if to touch my face. I had no idea it was this bad. I stepped back slightly, her sudden concern 4 weeks too late. "Please sit down," I said, gesturing to the arranged chairs. "Thank you for coming." They settled in an unusual tension hanging in the air. In most family gatherings, conversation flowed immediately, often with Blake dominating. Today, they all seemed uncertain, waiting for me to take the lead. "I asked you here because we need to talk about what happened." I began, my voice steadier than I expected. Not just about the accident or the cabin, but about our family dynamic as a whole. My father shifted uncomfortably. Son, if this is about the money, we've resolved that situation. No need to dwell on it. This isn't about money, I said firmly. This is about something much more fundamental. I distributed copies of my letter to each of them. I've written down my thoughts because it's important to me that you hear everything without interruption. I'd like you to read this first and then we can talk. The room fell silent as they began to read. I watched their expressions change as they progressed through the pages where I had outlined clearly and without accusation the pattern of being excluded, overlooked, and taken for granted. I included specific examples, dates, events, and how these instances had made me feel. I concluded with what I needed from them moving forward if we were to have a healthy relationship. My mother was the first to look up, tears in her eyes. Quentin, we had no idea you felt this way. That's part of the problem, I replied gently. I've tried to tell you many times in many ways, but it was always dismissed or minimized. Blake put his letter down with more force than necessary. This is ridiculous. You're making it sound like we've been deliberately cruel to you. We're not perfect, but neither are you. You choose to see slights everywhere. I expected you might feel that way, I said, maintaining my calm. That's why I included specific examples with dates and contexts. These aren't perceptions, Blake. They're events that happened. So what do you want from us? My father asked, his tone defensive. A formal apology. Some kind of family penance. I want acknowledgement, I replied. I want awareness. And yes, I want change. I've outlined in the letter what a healthy relationship would look like for me. Clear communication, mutual respect, reciprocal effort. And if we don't meet your requirements, Blake challenged, what then? You'll disown us. I'll create distance, I corrected. I'll prioritize relationships that are healthy and supportive. I'll stop expecting from you what you've shown you can't or won't provide. The conversation grew heated after that. Blake accused me of being selfish and oversensitive. Dad argued that family relationships couldn't be regulated like business contracts. Mom cried about how I was breaking her heart with these accusations. Throughout it all, I maintained my position calmly, returning always to specific examples rather than emotions. When Blake claimed I was exaggerating the hospital incident, I showed them my phone logs with the calls to each of them, the timestamps, the duration. When Dad suggested I was being unreasonable about the cabin money, I reminded him that I wasn't invited on the trip where the damage occurred. Tiffany had been quiet throughout most of the exchange, but suddenly she spoke up. He's right, she said, her voice small but clear. Everyone turned to look at her in surprise. Quentin is right, she repeated, stronger now. We do treat him differently. We do take him for granted. I've seen it for years, but never said anything because it was easier not to. Tiffany, Mom began, but my sister continued. When was the last time we rearranged plans for Quentin the way we do for Blake or me? When was the last time we celebrated his achievements the way we celebrate ours? He planned your entire birthday party, Dad, and you barely thanked him. The room fell silent, my sister's unexpected support creating a shift in the dynamic. I'm not asking for special treatment, I said, into the silence. Just equal consideration. Just the basic respect of being included, of having my time and efforts valued, of being checked on when I'm in the hospital. Blake stood up suddenly. This is bullshit. I'm not sitting here being lectured about how terrible I am. He walked toward the door. You can leave if you want, I said evenly. That's your choice. But it will be a statement about what you value more, being right or having a relationship with me. He hesitated, hand on the doorknob, then turned back with a frustrated sigh. Fine. But I don't agree with how you're characterizing things. You don't have to agree, I replied. You just have to listen. The conversation continued for hours, cycles of defensiveness and brief moments of understanding. My parents struggled to see past their intentions to the impact of their actions. Blake fluctuated between apology and justification. Tiffany continued to offer quiet corroboration of my experiences. By the end, we hadn't resolved everything, but something had shifted. My mother had moved from denial to a tearful acknowledgement that perhaps they had taken me for granted. My father, always the most stoic, admitted that he might have shown favoritism unintentionally. Blake remained the most resistant, but even he conceded that the hospital situation had been mishandled. We agreed to try. They would be more mindful of inclusion and appreciation. I would be more direct about my needs, rather than silently accommodating. We would meet again in a month to check in on our progress. As they prepared to leave, Tiffany hung back. When the others had gone, she hugged me carefully, mindful of my injury. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. "That took a lot of courage." "Thank you for speaking up," I replied. It meant everything. 2 months passed. True to my word, I maintained clearer boundaries. I declined family gatherings that were inconvenient, no longer rearranging my schedule automatically. I expressed my needs directly rather than hoping they would be noticed. I celebrated my own achievements rather than waiting for validation. Some things improved. My mother made more consistent efforts to check in with me, asking about my work with genuine interest. Tiffany and I grew closer, our relationship evolving into something more equal and supportive. My father, though less demonstrative, showed his effort through small actions like calling before making plans that included me. Blake remained the most resistant to change, our interactions still strained. But even he seemed more conscious of his behavior, occasionally catching himself mid-interruption or acknowledging when he'd been dismissive. Work became a source of renewed satisfaction. The Westbrook rebrand had been a success, earning me a promotion to senior designer. I found myself more confident in client meetings, more willing to advocate for my ideas, a spillover effect from standing up for myself with my family. I began dating again, meeting Emma through a design conference. Unlike Amanda, who had grown frustrated with my family situation, Emma respected the boundaries I'd established and supported my ongoing journey toward healthier relationships. Jeff and Sarah remained constants, the family I had chosen rather than been born into. Sunday dinners at their place became a tradition, a stark contrast to the tension-filled family meals of my past. 6 months after the accident, my mother called with an unexpected apology. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," she began. "About how we made you feel invisible. I want you to know I'm truly sorry, Quentin. I never meant to hurt you that way. It wasn't perfect healing, but it was a start. The road ahead would have its challenges, its setbacks and disappointments. But something fundamental had changed. I had changed. The accident that had seemed like a cruel twist of fate had become the catalyst for a necessary awakening. Sometimes it takes being completely abandoned to realize you've been rescuing yourself all along. Family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up when you're broken, who makes space for your truth, who sees you fully and loves you anyway. Sometimes those people share your DNA. Sometimes they don't. The true measure isn't in the relation, but in the relationship. As I look back now, I realize that standing up for myself wasn't just about confronting my family. It was about confronting the voice inside me that said I didn't deserve better. It was about recognizing my own worth when others couldn't or wouldn't. Have you ever had to create boundaries with family or friends who took you for granted? How did you find the courage to stand up for yourself? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might help someone else find their voice. And if you found value in my journey, please like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who might need to hear it. Sometimes the most important family we create is the community of those who've walked similar paths. Thank you for being part of mine today.